Imagine a world where science, art, and philosophy thrived together with faith and empire. A time when scholars mapped the stars, doctors rewrote medicine, and libraries held the wisdom of ancient civilizations. That world existed, not in Europe, but in the Middle East, under the Abbasid Caliphate. This is the story of how one dynasty built one of history's greatest civilizations, and how it eventually fell. When the Prophet Muhammad died in 632 in Medina, his followers were left with both a new faith and the challenge of leadership. Abu Bakr became the first caliph, or God's deputy on earth, uniting the Arabian Peninsula under Islam. The young Muslim armies soon faced the great powers of the time, the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Sassanid Empire. Both were exhausted from years of war, and within 2 decades the Muslims had conquered vast territories from them. But victory brought internal tension. In 656, the third caliph, Uthman, was assassinated, sparking a civil war known as the First Fitna. Ali, the Prophet's cousin and son-in-law, became caliph, but faced opposition from the Syrian governor Muawiyah. After years of conflict, Ali was killed, and Muawiyah established the Umayyad dynasty, ruling from Damascus. The Umayyads expanded Islam's borders from Spain to Central Asia, but their rule favored Arab Muslims, while non-Arab converts, known as Mawali, were treated unequally. Heavy taxes on non-Muslims and political discontent grew. By the mid-700s, rebellion was in the air. The Abbasid family, claiming descent from the Prophet's uncle Al-Abbas, led the opposition. Their followers carried black banners, symbolizing their revolution against the Umayyads' white. In 747, Abu Muslim, a Persian general loyal to the Abbasids, launched a revolt in Khorasan, uniting Arabs and non-Arabs under the promise of equality and justice. In 750, at the Battle of the River Zab, the Abbasid forces crushed the Umayyad army. The last Umayyad caliph was killed, though one prince, Abd al-Rahman, escaped to Spain to found a new dynasty in Cordoba. The Abbasids took power, and Abu al-Abbas al-Safa became the first Abbasid caliph. Under Caliph al-Mansur, the Abbasids built a new capital, Baghdad, in 762 on the banks of the Tigris River. Designed as a perfect circle, it became known as Madinat al-Salam, or the City of Peace. Within a century, Baghdad had become the cultural and intellectual heart of the Islamic world. During the reign of Harun al-Rashid, the empire reached its peak. His court became legendary for its wealth, culture, and learning, immortalized in the stories of the 1001 Nights. Baghdad became the center of a remarkable age of knowledge. The Abbasids established the famous House of Wisdom, where scholars of different faiths and backgrounds gathered to translate and study ancient Greek, Persian, and Indian texts. This movement not only preserved classical knowledge but expanded it. Thinkers like Al-Kindi explored philosophy and astronomy, while Al-Khwarizmi laid the foundations of algebra and gave the world the word algorithm. Paper, introduced from China, revolutionized the recording and sharing of knowledge. The Abbasid world became a place where reason and curiosity were celebrated, and where learning itself was considered an act of faith. Yet even during this golden age, political problems grew. When Harun al-Rashid died in 809, he left the empire to his son Al-Amin, naming another son, Al-Ma'mun, as successor after him. This plan failed, and civil war broke out between the brothers. Al-Ma'mun's forces won, and he became caliph, ruling from the eastern city of Merv before returning to Baghdad. Al-Ma'mun was a patron of science and philosophy, but he also imposed his own views on religion, declaring that the Quran was created rather than eternal. Many scholars disagreed, and those who resisted were punished in what became known as the Mihna, or Islamic Inquisition. Later, caliphs continued to face rebellion and division. Al-Mu'tasim, one of Harun's successors, created an army of Turkish slave soldiers known as Mamluks. They were loyal to him alone, but their growing power would later destabilize the empire. As the caliphs weakened, The Mamluks and regional governors gained control, and the vast empire began to fragment. By the mid-9th century, the Abbasids' control had begun to collapse. New dynasties rose across the Islamic world. In Egypt, the Tulunids ruled independently. In Persia, the Saffarids and Samanids carved out their own kingdoms. Even Baghdad, once the center of power, was racked by riots and coups. In 945, the Shiite Buyid dynasty seized Baghdad, reducing the caliphs to figureheads. To the west, another Shiite dynasty, the Fatimids, founded Cairo and established their own rival caliphate, dividing the Muslim world even further. In the 11th century, the Seljuk Turks emerged from Central Asia and swept across Persia and Mesopotamia. They took control of Baghdad, but allowed the Abbasid caliphs to remain as spiritual leaders. Under the Seljuks, the Islamic world experienced a brief revival of unity, but new threats were on the horizon. In 1099, Christian crusaders from Europe captured Jerusalem, and the Muslim world faced centuries of warfare and instability. Then, in the 13th century, came the most devastating invasion of all, the Mongols. Led by Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, the Mongols destroyed Persia and moved westward toward Baghdad. In 1258, they besieged the city. The Abbasid Caliph al-Mustasim refused to surrender. When the walls fell, the Mongols unleashed one of the worst massacres in history. For 40 days, Baghdad burned. Thousands were slaughtered. And the city's libraries, filled with centuries of learning, were thrown into the Tigris River, turning its waters black with ink. The caliph was executed, and with him 5 centuries of Abbasid rule came to an end. Though a symbolic Abbasid line continued under Mamluk protection in Egypt, real political power was gone. Yet the Abbasids left behind a legacy far greater than their empire. They transformed the Islamic world into a center of science, art, and culture. They gave humanity algebra, advances in medicine and astronomy, hospitals, libraries, and a tradition of inquiry that later helped spark the European Renaissance. Their reign proved that faith and reason could coexist and flourish together. From a small desert community to one of the greatest empires in history, the Abbasid story is a reminder that no civilization, however powerful, lasts forever. Their rise marked the beginning of Islam's Golden Age, and their fall marked its end. But their true legacy lives on, not in their armies or palaces, but in the knowledge and ideas they passed down to the world.